Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Spilling the Tea on GovCon. I'm Teresa Moon, Vice President of Communications and Marketing for Parabolis. We are the preeminent partnership for government contractors, providing holistic support that includes a line of credit to fund your growth. The purpose of this podcast is to assist small businesses with success in the federal marketplace by introducing them to industry experts and resources that they may not otherwise know about. Today, we welcome Shauna Weatherly, President and founder of FedSub K. I have followed Shauna on LinkedIn for a lot of years now and was fortunate enough to connect with her and collaborate on a webinar a few years back. And I have been so excited to welcome her as our guest to our show. She has a wealth of knowledge from personal experience within government and industry support. And today's conversation is going to pinpoint some hot topics some of you have been asking us to cover. So without further ado, welcome, Shauna.
Thank you, Teresa. It's great to be here. I'm so excited to get to talk to you today.
Likewise. For those of us that are listening today and might be new to the show or might be new to government contracting, I'd love it if you could share a little bit more information about yourself, your experience within the federal marketplace, and information about the work that you do.
Well, sure. Let's see, where do I start? I guess a couple of years ago, I retired from federal service after 35 and a half years. And that I've been doing it since I was in my early 20s and seen a lot of things in there, budget, manpower, all sorts of things. But I kind of landed in acquisition over time and started out and kind of worked my way up through all the different jobs that we had in the federal space internally and agencies for that work, from an intern all the way up to a policy advisor toward the end of that time. And during that time, as I was a contracting officer, I just kind of thought this might be fun. So when I retired, I decided to launch a business to help companies, small businesses in particular, navigate and understand some of the things that happen kind of behind the curtain in federal contracting so that they could understand that better, go in with more informed decisions when they're navigating the marketplace, and spotlight some of those things as we see these changes coming up here now, especially this past year, right? So,
Yeah, absolutely. We've been inundated with change with so many facets of the industry. And so I know that a lot of our listeners are tuning in even closer now because you're hitting the nail on the head for a lot of things for them. And I think that's a good segue into what I was going to ask you first. Given all of your past experience, what was really the catalyst for founding FedSub K? I mean, I'm sure there was something in particular that sparked that inspiration.
well, yeah, as I moved up in the ranks and started doing more of the outreach to small business and going to different conferences and speaking at different engagements and just having, companies come in and want to learn about what I did at particular agencies or if we had opportunities, I started realizing that there was a real need for businesses to understand a little bit better some of the processes and things that we did so we could dispel some misunderstandings and some of the myths around parts of the acquisition cycle that companies don't get to see. You submit an offer and then it kind of goes into this black hole and what's going on with it until you hear either you got the award or you didn't, right? And so kind of getting people to understand the thought process that go into that, the considerations that the government is taking into when they're making decisions, share and that knowledge, and then foster some growth, hopefully within the small business community where they can use that and leverage that to maybe respond better to the government or interact, market with even the government or prime contractors even in the marketplace going forward. So that was kind of the catalyst, is meeting these businesses and seeing what they did and didn't know and realizing, wow, there's a real, gap here that people should understand. There's no reason for them not to.
Right. There is somewhat of that gray area, and I think the mystery behind it is really unfortunate. We work with small businesses as well of varying sizes because that category is so broad.
Right.
And there are a lot of those business owners that are coming from past performance in commercial or past performance doing a specific capability within a larger organization and have broken off on their own. And when they get into it, some of them don't recognize, unless they've had some engagement of some sort with the federal marketplace, that there's such a different way of doing business with the federal government than there is in the commercial market. And while there are a lot of pros to that pros and cons stage. There's not so much the cons, it's just the understanding what the differences are so that you can navigate it effectively and not sit, 2, 3, 4 years without having any, financial activity happening for your company. And so
Right.
it's so important that people like you not only are available and willing to work with businesses, but that you do produce a lot of information as well as far as educational support for that. And I know some of the things when we were prepping for this conversation, we were talking about your experience as a mentor and why it's so important that you find knowledgeable coaches and mentors in the GovCon space for not only the fact that there is such a difference in any other marketplace, if you will, that you may have engaged in the past, but there's always also a lot of phonies who are making their way with nowhere near the experience that you have to contribute to really that mentoring process. And so if you wouldn't mind just elaborating a little bit on that as well.
Yeah, well, I think people should learn from other people's mistakes, right?
Right.
And and I'm a big proponent of that. It's like if I did it, don't do it this way, or if I did it, this might have worked, and maybe it'll work for you. So I
Hmm.
think that kind of helps businesses navigate the quickest path from what I call like SAM to win, right? It's
Yeah.
getting registered in SAM all the way to getting your first win. And
Hmm.
there's so much of this governmentese, everything's written in this like strange, formal official language. And
Hmm.
it's hard to kind of break through that. And people like myself know how to interpret that, know what it means, know what it's important when it's not, and also bring together a lot of disjointed information, right? We have
Hmm.
regs all over the place. There's regs that reference other regs that reference a third reg
Hmm.
and within a reg, and it's very difficult to kind of, find the path through that. So
Hmm.
that's one of the reasons that I think it's really important to find a coach and a mentor that can get you thinking along those lines, show
Hmm.
you that path through some of those questionable things that you may need answers to quickly to get a bid in or to decide if you want to go no go on a action or something like that. There's
Hmm.
also agency specific quirks that people like myself can tell you about for the agencies that we've worked for, especially if we've
Hmm.
worked in government before or with government from the industry perspective for a long time. Every agency has its own way of doing business, and it's really important to
Hmm.
understand that when you're approaching an agency in this market.
Yeah.
And getting some of that historical information and market knowledge about that agency is also important, why they
Hmm.
buy or don't buy the way they do. We see patterns over, 20, 30 years, and the data gives you one pattern, but it doesn't tell you the whole story that people can tell you as well. So finding that trusted person who's, done the work, has been connected in the marketplace for a while and can kind of read those tea leaves is important for you as you're trying to break into this marketplace and understand the best path for you to go forward.
Right. And I'm sure people that are listening are thinking to themselves, I need to connect with Shauna. And I encourage you to on LinkedIn, because not only does she provide wonderful information on her LinkedIn page, but then you can connect with her through her website as well and see all of the array of services that she can provide. And you hit the nail on the head on a couple of different items there. It's number one, agency to agency function differently in the way that they pursue people to partner with or people to buy things from.
Mhm.
And their
Yes.
process is different. And that's something that has a learning curve in and of itself. So having someone that knows that can tell you ahead of time, because it isn't something that you don't get a sheet of paper once you get your SAM registration in that says, this is how you buy or you sell to X, Y, and Z agency. It
Right.
doesn't work that way. And so it's so important to know that there are nuances that you don't know what you don't know. So getting involved with someone early on is going to help you with the growing pains of not being able to grow as fast as you'd like to, even though that your capabilities are important and probably necessary in spaces that you're not even aware. So, by recognizing that mission that you were talking about as well, understanding who the buyer is and why they buy the way that they do and using historical information for that, that's a lot of legwork that some business owners don't take into account when they're getting involved. And so
Right.
I love that you mentioned all of those things. So if these are items that you currently aren't aware of in your process and aren't utilizing that type of information to assist with your growth in the federal marketplace, even more reason to keep listening to the rest of this conversation, but reach out to Shauna because it'll be a lot faster tracked if you have someone that's guiding you in the right direction than going the wrong way and figuring it out after you get to the brick wall. So,
Yeah.
and there's so many changes now. Even people that have been in government contracting, we're having a far overhaul right now. There's
Mhm.
all kinds of talk about what you know a lot about concerning GSA, and we're going to get in a little bit of that. But I think some of the ways that I've seen some of the newer businesses and their leaders not freak out, but get a little bit cautious is when they're hearing things like contract consolidation. And so, if you wouldn't mind getting in and digging in on that a little bit, what does it mean to a small business that's engaging when they hear contract consolidation?
Well, we've had it kind of explained to industry a couple different ways. And as we're
Mhm.
ratcheting down and moving through this process, it's kind of morphing a little bit. And I even realized that this week after going to some of to GSA folks themselves and asking some of these questions point blank and actually getting some really good responses. So,
That's good.
what contract consolidation, it all originated from an executive order, and then Office of Management and Budget put out a memo last July that kind of provided implementation guidance. And what it basically is trying to find efficiencies in buying what are considered common goods and common services. So the whole point of contract consolidation is to kind of use centralized contracts that already exist, maximize the use of existing contract vehicles, and then identify opportunities for new contract vehicles that would be more centralized for these common goods and services. And I'll explain kind of what those are in just a second. And then the other thing is maybe centralizing some of our procurement functions, either within
Mhm.
agencies to a centralized agency that is determined, between OMB and maybe the category management, because we do categorize our buys now in government. We've
Mhm.
worked under that for a while, or maybe even centralizing some of this contract buying at GSA in terms of them providing the actual, contracting officer doing the documentation. That's where you would submit a quote, things like that.
Mhm.
So when we're talking about common goods and services, which is the focus point of the contract consolidation, we're talking about things that are defined that are highly commercialized, that are not customized or don't require much customization at all, easy to standardize, mission agnostic, and require a very low level of agency involvement in the process of scoping what that work is or administering the performance of that work. So, that's a pretty large group of things that we buy in government now, right?
Right.
So that's why people are a little freaked out about it, because that's a lot of
Mhm.
buying that could,
Mhm.
be centralized in a few places. So what we heard this week, it started out as a conversation that, well, GSA is going to kind of take over all this buying for all the agencies. That was kind of what we heard in the beginning when the first executive order came out and
Right.
the OMB memo was put in place. But the Office of Centralized Acquisition Support at GSA, or OCAS, that was stood up to kind of manage this process at GSA, has recently started doing what they're calling pipeline reviews with industry. And they had their first one last week. And in that pipeline review, GSA OCAS made it very clear that agencies are just going with an opt in model now to have GSA do their buying. It doesn't mean that they still don't have to use agencies if they do their buying themselves, don't have to use these centralized contracts and maximize the use of existing contracts. It
Mhm.
just means that GSA may not always be doing all that buying. So contract consolidation may look a little different depending on your agency. It could be
Mhm.
your agency is, buying, still doing all its own buying, but using these centralized contracts, these existing contracts, or that they have shifted their buying to GSA or another agency to do that buying for them so they can focus on more mission critical type of buying, more complex buying.
Mhm.
So that's kind of what kind of came out of last week, is some clarification around that optional model there. But what OCAS did say to me last week was that agencies are now submitting forecasts annually to GSA for their common goods and services. And they have a team analyzing those needs and assessing if there are existing government wide vehicles available to meet those needs, or if GSA or other agencies will be tapped to establish other government-wide vehicles to centralize, again, that buying, that common product and service buying. So
Mhm.
that's kind of where contract consolidation stands right now.
I mean, thank you so much for that overview because it definitely helps put it into perspective for me because, obviously I'm not sitting in the driver's seat and things like that. And so you broke it down very simply. And, I wonder if someone else that might be listening might be a little concerned because this is what came to mind for me. The number one thing that I think a lot of people that are running a small business that started it themselves, and that typically means that they're doing the business development for the company as well.
Right.
Their number one goal in their mind when they get started, for the most part, most of them that I meet, is getting those introductions and building those relationships. Is something like contract consolidation impeding the positive progress that a personal relationship with a contracting officer, say, or
Right.
someone within an agency, does it eliminate the efficacy of something like that now, or is that still gonna work?
Well, the people that set the requirements are still going to be at the agency,
Yeah,
right? So you have that point of contact that you should be working right now as well. It's not just, there's this myth that the contracting officer decides what gets bought and how it gets bought and all these things. It's no,
right.
no, it doesn't work that way. There's a requiring activity and an end user. They could be one and the same, they could be different. They're the ones that decide what gets bought. The
Mhm,
contracting officer really is just kind of the gatekeeper running that decision through the process of actually acquisition. So
mhm.
so I don't think those relationships are going to change if you have them. If you don't have them, you need to build them
Yeah.
because that's where those decisions get made. The switch to contracting officers, there's going to be some procedural and process changes there, sure. If
Mhm,
GSA is doing it versus maybe your agency and you're used to that. We could see personnel shift from
mhm,
agencies who were doing the buying in their agency shift to now be part of GSA and doing that
mhm.
buying. There is talk that people may move with contracts, to do some of
Okay.
that. So you may or may not lose that
Right.
connection.
Well, that's good to know as well, because I know that that was something that came up in a conversation that I had with someone internal to industry. And, I said, I wonder how many other people are thinking this too,
Oh,
because
yeah.
that's how I, work my own personal professional life, is building those relationships. And of course, while I love having new friends and things like that, I'd hate for it to go away because it's been super beneficial. And so it's good to know. But I'd love for us to shift into, because GSA is the predominant topic of the day as of late. And given your experience within there, you know, as this moves into what really establishing what their role is going to be going forward in federal buying, can you highlight three considerations that you've identified already for companies to remember when they're seeking, performing, or partnering under GSA schedules?
Well, I think the first one I would say is market research and relationships, right? We just talked
Yeah.
about that. It's, these vehicles are not a build it and they will come vehicle. I mean, a lot of people think you get one and now stuff is going to start flowing to you. It doesn't happen that easily. I know, Teresa, you know this. A lot of
Mhm.
people know this, but it's kind of news to people when they first get their GSA schedule that, oh, well, stuff's not showing up in eBay that, applies to me, or I'm not hearing about a quote. What do I do?
Mhm.
It's really a vehicle that helps you market a way to get to you quick and streamlined, giving agencies streamlined access to what you buy. So, you
Mhm.
pre-priced, it's already in place. All I have to do is do an order. That's the desirable piece of this from a
Mhm.
contracting officers and agencies perspective who's buying. And just remember that not all buys on GSA or on eBuy because agencies
Mhm.
get the chance to solicit a subset of schedule holders outside of eBuy if they want. So
Mhm.
that's all in the processes that have now shifted to GSA's FAR supplement, GSAM, and you can read all about that in that regulation, and we can provide a citation for that if you want.
Yeah, that would be great, and we'll add that to the show notes for
Yeah,
when this yeah.
great.
Mhm.
And so just look for the award data to find opportunities, find pricing information on Acquisition Gateway. There's tools out there that show you what the mean, median, and mode averages are of different prices under GSA schedules, and then build the relationships with requiring activities, end users, buyers, things like that we were talking about to kind of help you fill in all those gaps, know who to chase, who's doing the buying on schedule, et cetera, and how much they're buying.
Mhm.
I think the second thing is, thinking beyond compliance.
Especially
So,
with GSA. Holy
yes,
goodness. Mhm.
especially with GSA. So, compliance beyond the wind. So, I get a lot of people that come to me with their GSA schedules and go, "We just won. Now tell me what I have to do." And it's like, okay, you need to know how you're going to meet compliance and reporting requirements before you get an award. You've got to have a structure set up, and there's a lot of, Teresa, you work with people on this, I'm sure, to understand how you're going to meet compliance and reporting. There's quarterly industrial funding fee remittance that has to occur. There's monthly transactional data reporting that is new under GSA that is now under all the special item numbers, where you have to report monthly. You have to be able to segregate costs and report all that accurately. You have to have even do this sometimes if the answer is 0. I've sold 0. I haven't done anything. You still have to do it. So you don't get to put off getting up to speed. It happens within the first quarter after, or the quarter after the first quarter you've won your schedule. So you've got maybe anywhere from 3 to 5 months to get up to speed max. And that's a short period of time when you're also trying to market your vehicle and do that. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing quickly is contractor team agreements. That's where 2 or more schedule contractors can partner to combine their capabilities to really fulfill a larger, more complex requirement as a single team. One company would act as the lead, the other are members. And there's an agreement that you would put in place, not unlike a teaming agreement or a joint venture agreement if you've done those before. And you can propose those on any opportunity under the program unless they're specifically prohibited by the government in the actions. So lots of things you can do with contract teaming agreements. That's like a whole subject in and of itself. But they do have a website, GSA. If you just Google GSA CTAs, there's a whole page that comes up that talks about it. So.
Outside of, obviously the obvious of why we're having this conversation so that we can share with our network the work that you do, if there was, 1 or 2 tips that you could tell someone that is recognizing that GSA schedule is the avenue that they're going to need to do in certain circumstances in order to continue, succeeding in the federal market, what are some really quick tips that you could provide to them, just going forward, things that you would like to see people keeping in mind?
Yeah, I think you really have to look at where's the buying being done, the data, right? The historical buying. Has that industry or your item and what you're trying to sell historically been purchased under GSA schedule? If it hasn't, GSA is probably not the avenue for you. Or you can talk to your agency now and see what they're thinking. Are they going to be shifting that to GSA? Or how are they going to be working with that? Those aren't questions that you can't ask. You may it's kind of uncomfortable to ask sometimes, but if they can't tell you, they're going to tell you they can't tell you. I mean, it's always worth the ask, I always say. And then you want to also see how saturated that market is. How many awards are going to the people under that schedule if you're looking to go to GSA? So are the awards only going to a few out of 100, or are they going, fairly equitably? Is there a good distribution, 50% or less? That gives you an idea too. So before you leap into the schedules arena, I think those are 2 things you really have to think about. It's an expensive proposition to get a GSA schedule and keep it up. And I think that's a lot of businesses don't understand that. And even if you do it yourself, it is an investment in time and resources in your own company to get it done. So I think having those 2 things in mind before you just say, oh, GSA, everything's going to consolidate to GSA, I've got to get a GSA schedule. Though you really need to look at those 2 things.
Right. And there's caveats within it too. Now, I'm by no means a GSA expert, but I do listen when people who are talk about it. You have a certain amount of time where if you're dormant in the system, that they remove you from it, correct? Am I right to say that?
Yeah, if you don't have a certain number of sales within the first 5-year period, and then in every 5-year period after that, there's a total of 4 that's possible, then you're out. They don't want to take the time and have the resources expended to manage a contract that is sitting there not being used. It's not cost effective to them. It's not cost effective to you. And a lot of companies, I mean, my sister works for a company who did that. They went out, got a GSA schedule, and couldn't get any sales on it. And after 5 years, it was gone.
Yeah.
And so you have to know that you've got, the relationship piece, having the relationships and building those in place and having those conversations and knowing that you've got people who are interested is really important piece of, the process also before getting a schedule. So yeah,
Absolutely.
for sure.
And some of the takeaways that I have from what we've just talked about is, first and foremost, market research is so important because you can have all the relationships in the world. And if you don't understand what the mission of the agency is that you're pursuing, you're going to be spinning your wheels. So it's not just about tracking the dollars and going after the biggest wins. It's really understanding where your capabilities are a good fit, or being able to convey to those relationships new innovative ideas that they may not be thinking about. And I think some people are intimidated to even take that route because they think nobody will want to listen. But, the answer is always no if you don't ask. And so
Right.
we always like to talk about that. Market research is so important, not just for being able to be on target for what's being looked for, but also being able to understand, if you are a really good fit in certain agencies and providing support for certain missions, things are going to shift. And so you might have to go to another agency that you weren't aware of that might need your services as well. And it's a constant, learning curve, not so much that you're learning something that is, beyond your reach. You're learning things in terms of where your capabilities can fit and where your company might need to grow into it. So that was
Yeah.
one of the great takeaways that I got from you with that. And
Thank
the
you.
compliance piece, especially with GSA, so important because they are regularly asking you to provide data to them.
Mhm.
And that is an undertaking. So not only do you have to do things the right way and stay in compliance, but you have to show the proof of it too. And that isn't just going to, go into a black hole. They might
No.
not come and knock on your door tomorrow, but someone is going to be following up, especially if those compliance tools aren't being provided to them
Oh,
in the amount of
yes.
time that they ask for it. So if you
Yeah.
miss the mark a couple of months in a row, someone is going to start coming and looking for you. So very
Yeah,
important.
GSA has a whole staff that looks at
Yeah.
this. That is their job, is to
hmm
review this stuff as it comes in, these industrial specialists, yes.
Right. And similarly as well to, it's funny in our industry, we look for people's contract backlogs so that we can walk them through what a cash flow projection would look like for them if in the event they keep the contracts that they're currently on and then they win the ones that are in their pipeline. And interestingly enough, sometimes business owners will list the entire IDIQ dollar value in their contract backlog. And it's like, well, that would be awesome. That would be a life changer. However, you got to win a task order, and task order is not going to be the entire value of the IDIQ itself. And
Right.
they said, "Oh, well, we're on it now, so we'll get one." And like I've told people through certification processes as well, it's like just because you got an 8A certification doesn't mean the SBA gets a phone call and goes, "Teresa and her company have the 8A." Or have the 8A
Right.
certification now. So let's call them because we're going to start putting them on contracts. It doesn't work
Not
that way.
does not work that way. I will guarantee you that. Yes.
No.
Yes.
So they really getting out there and understanding the nooks and crannies of all the differences between what it takes to work in the federal marketplace and the differences in the outside on the commercial side. And vice versa. Commercial businesses now, are being solicited. They always have been because we've had that in place for a really long time. But the commercial businesses now that are coming in to fulfill some of the, you know, requirements that are being asked of them, they have a shell shock coming for them
Oh,
too,
yeah.
because well, especially with GSA.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So I hate to laugh about it, but it, yeah,
Yeah, it is. It is real.
hmm
Yes.
yeah.
Very real.
So I'm encouraging anyone that's on either side of that we've talked about. And if there are things that you still have questions of, to reach out to Shauna. LinkedIn's a great place to connect with her. Check out her website. The link is on her LinkedIn page as well. You have really done a great job of providing us with a wealth of information. And we are definitely
Thank you.
going to invite you back so that we can have a continuation of this conversation, because when we prepped for this, there were like 10 different avenues that we
Yeah,
could have gone through.
right.
And you can't do that all in one sitting because somebody's head would explode, probably mine. But
Yeah.
but I very much appreciate your time, and thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Teresa. It's been great.
Awesome. As always, we pride ourselves on sharing the most insightful and exciting people and information to help you better navigate your GovCon journey. If you like what you heard today, you can see all of our past podcasts, which are archived on our Parabolas YouTube channel. Stay tuned for all of our future guests in the coming months as we help you grow to great heights in the year ahead. I'm Teresa Moon, and this is Spilling the Tea on GovCon. Have a great day, my friends.